morning, everyone. In direct violation of the Criminal Code 176 and in direct violation of our charter rights, Aylmer Police have issued a ticket reopening Ontario Act charges laid for church service gathering. See details here. And the people behind, or the people in the comments, don't like this one bit. Not one little tiny bit. Not one bit. And everybody's saying, go to Costco, go shopping. It's safe there, only if you're shopping at a big box store. People are saying oath breakers and scabs do it for the money, or is it just the power tripping that have them break the law? You swore an oath, says Ian, to the charter, not political thugs. You'll lose the respect of the public if you continue to take action like this. I think it's too late. Here is somebody speaking about... Here's somebody speaking about the pastor getting the ticket. Somebody asked what was the ticket for, and they said it was because the choir was too big. But they according to him, they shut down the service and ticketed the pastor during a service, which is in violation of Criminal Code 176. Which is, what use is it if nobody follows it? What use is it if you don't have any recourse? What use is it if the official opposition ignores all of this and continues to say, we're doing a real good job? That Justin Trudeau is doing a real good job. Garnet Genius says, I'm very grateful that our provincial government continues to allow attendance at religious services with strict protocols in place like tracing, limited capacity, mandatory masking, and social distancing. We are safer on a plane than on a plane or in a store. Yikes. Bad take, Garnet Genius. It's very interesting when the police are acting like this, and nobody seems to care. It's not like there's outrage, right? It's kind of I don't know. The reporting is subpar. The people's recourse is nearly non-existent. Basically, if they can avoid taking it to trial, they'll avoid taking it to trial. If they take it to trial, maybe they dismiss it because you're wasting the court's time, which isn't true. If they do look at the case, maybe they'll set aside the constitutionality of it and rule on whether or not you broke the law as written and say, yeah, the constitutionality will come after the crisis. There's not going to be an end to the crisis if the government is allowed to continue to break the law. So Garnet Genius for not realizing what's actually going on in the world, regardless of where you're based, Alberta or Ontario. I would be reporting on this. There are and have been churches that have been shut down in Manitoba, and I think in Alberta as well. Very well-known ones. And so it's interesting that they've got MPs out there dousing those flames with tweets like that, with outlandish, ridiculous tweets like that. This is a reminder. I reported on this when Leslyn Lewis first penned this, but she says, National Post, this is from October 2nd. There's a socialist coup unfolding in Canada, and we taxpayers are funding it. Oh, knock those scales off your eyes, right? It's not just me that's saying this. Leslyn Lewis, former contender for the leadership of the CPC, is saying this. It's not something that is, and I don't think that it's socialist. I think it only looked socialist in October because the true depth and severity of this wasn't even close to known then, right? At this point, we know how deep the CCP goes. We know how deep the corruption goes, right? Before, on October 3rd, the Hunter Biden laptop hadn't been dropped. Understanding that China targets specifically Western politicians to then ensnare in blackmail and bribery schemes. Understanding that gives a very good context for what's going on in our leadership right now, right? And I'm talking, and so I think that model has been used to usurp the UN. I think that model has been used to usurp the WHO, and I think that model has been used to usurp our government. And if the UN has programs for mayors that usurped United Nations is being turned to be used by the CCP, and that's not good. You understand? It's not good. It's not good. Anyway, Leslyn Lewis is saying, Canada is quietly going through a socialist coup. It's not so quiet anymore. If I had written these words just 1 year ago, it would have been deemed conspiratorial, but I've heard from too many Canadians over the past 6 months about what they have seen taking place. Ever since Justin Trudeau tried to grant himself king-like powers at the beginning of the COVID crisis, what we have been witnessing in Canada is a socialist coup that we, the taxpayers, are funding. Yep. Yeah, we're shoveling money out. No accountability, no nothing. And what are we getting out of our money? The worst result ever. We have high unemployment. We have high debt. We have high food prices. Everything is more expensive. And Justin Trudeau wants to add a carbon tax. Mismanagement, poor management. I wanted to show you this. The socialist coup is well funded by our tax dollars. And I've talked about NGOs, and I've talked about how tax dollars, not just me, Vivian Cruz, and there's a bunch of other people talk about how Canadian taxpayer dollars go to funding NGOs that lock up pipeline expansion. Pipeline expansion is good for the country. Moving oil and goods like that on rail ties up the rail lines for the other goods that we need to move to market, and is dangerous, more dangerous than a pipeline, certainly. Regardless, pipelines are good. So we use taxpayer dollars to fund NGOs to lock up the development of our pipelines, taxpayer funded, in courts. You see, and it's just we're funding our own demise on it, right? And they've used the same model again with COVID, right? The mandatory masking that was done by the Masking Our Communities or something like that. I say again, you're never the bad guy. You're never Voldemort in your own story, right? You're never the bad guy in your own story. So they have to frame it in such a way that the people think we're doing this to protect everyone's safety. Even if the people don't want it, they'll want it because they'll be safe, right? Like they maybe don't understand what the danger is. But if the danger is not borne out in the data, and we're going to look at that later because that's what I do, it's just funding of our own demise. It's just funding of bad policy and driving bad policy through our own funding, right? Through the direction of, again, those shadowy, not so shadowy figures that turned out to be, looks like CCP, right? So who knows? I certainly don't. But this is a bad use of our taxpayer dollars. COVID zero. This is COVID zero Canada. They're brand new, 700 followers as of like this morning, I guess. Yesterday they had less. But this is the kind of astroturfing garbage that we're funding with our taxpayer dollars. And they say it's not just about the public health measures, it's about the timing of implementation of those measures. The timing is one of the most crucial factors. Let's keep our eye on the ball for the rest of the pandemic. It's time to go for COVID zero. Nope, that's not how these things work. And this is a CBC article advocating for this. But the problem is, once a virus is out, it's out. And all of these draconian lockdowns, all they do is destroy small business, which is maybe what some leadership want, but it's certainly not what I want. Certainly not what the small businesses want. Here's a tweet talking about having to pay, he says, still paying my condo fees in a private building and can't access my private gym. And this is in Alberta, Jason Kenney, blah, blah, blah. I guess I'll get fat watching some World Juniors play hockey while my hockey season is also canceled. Right? Gold's Gym members canceled, frustrated as billing continues through the closure. Well, what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? How about this? Alpine skiing. Ryan O'Connor says, where is the medical evidence to suggest that alpine skiing, now illegal, is unsafe in Ontario when ski chalet gatherings are already banned? Is it too much to ask that the health table to stop prohibiting activities based on wild speculation? And this is Laura Nash responding, alpine skiing is a socially distanced outdoor sport where you wear goggles and even a face mask when it's cold. So long as the chalets aren't crowded, it makes zero sense to harm one of the last bastions of recreation we have from our Canadian long winters. It's insane. It's insane what they're doing. A socialist coup? A silent socialist coup? Or is this just blatant socialism with a little COVID mask on it, right? You know, that terrifying character that Alberta rolled out? Yeah, this guy's wrecking our lives. I think that it's funny that, like, the tone deafness of the leadership. This is a councillor in Guelph. She says, so great to see the parks full of kids on toboggans and snowboards and volunteers starting community rinks. Everyone's keeping their distance and enjoying the snow. Well done, Guelph. Alberta had people arrested for playing on outdoor rinks. People will call the cops because they think that there's too many people on the rink. The toboggan hills, I've heard, were busy because there's literally nothing else to do. And we got all this snow. You can't go skiing. You can't go tubing. You can't go to the mall. You can't go shopping because it's unbelievably packed. And now you have to stand in line to get into the store for some strange reason. Why are we letting them destroy the health and safety? Because it's not healthy or safe to stand outside in -5 weather to wait to get into the store to get your groceries. That's not healthy or safe. And they are being this is just tone deaf ridiculousness. There are real problems, Miss O'Rourke. And you're sitting here saying, yeah, go play, guys. Everyone have fun. I love playing. I love having fun. I love kids playing in the wintertime. I love having the time for it. But this is just like the left hand not understanding what the right hand is doing. And like, I don't know, being absolutely ridiculous. It's being absolutely ridiculous, tone deaf, because our communities are being destroyed. If you aren't working for the government or for warehousing or e-commerce or something online, then you're being decimated. And there's nowhere to spend the money if you are still working, right? Like, you're not allowed to take your family out for dinner. You're not allowed to really go shopping. You can shop online, I guess. You're not allowed to really do anything. You can't plan a vacation. You can't plan a vacation 6 months from now because there's no assurity of anything. Even though there's not data to back any of this up. We're supposed to continue to play this game. It is insane. We're supposed to destroy our culture, destroy our economy, and destroy our hope for the future because cases are up. Like, is anybody still okay with this? This is unbelievably inappropriate. For many small businesses in Ontario, the province-wide lockdown that began on Boxing Day is the last straw. Devastating for many small businesses. This is a Pickering market that closed. There's more small businesses that closed. Here's going to England very quickly for a second. Only 377 people aged under 60 with no underlying health conditions have died of COVID in England's hospitals, NHS data shows. The province-wide lockdown continues as health officials warn more cases of the new United Kingdom COVID variant could be found. Canada has reported 4 cases over the weekend, 3 in Ontario. Yesterday I said it is unbelievably unlikely for the people in Pickering or wherever, Durham, wherever it was, the 2 people who had no contact with anybody, no travel or anything like that, could come up with the same mutation that came out that's happened in the United Kingdom. Today, Patty Haydu says, "Oh yeah, they had contact." Here she is right now. No, that's not true. Here she is. After investigation, these cases have been connected to a traveler from the United Kingdom. We all need to avoid non-essential travel and avoid mandatory and follow mandatory quarantine requirement upon return. They keep you, your loved ones, and communities safe. So these people either maybe lied to people in Ontario about having contact with people from the UK. But there's been, here's Norman Spector, new UK variant, and apparently it's not racist to call it that now, found in BC and Ontario draws calls to step up border security. We're still landing flights from China. This call for border security, why start now? I mean, like, that was racist 6 months ago, the Globe and Mail. Like, now that it's the United Kingdom, that's okay, but you don't want to rock the boat with China? Okay. I think it's very strange. Norman Spector says, "I think what this variant speaks to is how badly we've done at controlling regional, interprovincial, and international importation of cases," Dr. Morris said Sunday. In Toronto, if you look at the Toronto public health data, travel is 4.5%, and not industrial. Hold on, let me get it up. Institutional. Institutional cases are 3.2%, but travel's 4.5%. But if you compare to all of Canada, travel's like just 3.31%. But the most populous city in the country, I think that's true. Or is Vancouver more? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Toronto has a 4.5%, and we're locking down the economy. Not just Toronto either, the whole province, because of the bad numbers in Toronto, and they just keep getting worse despite the lockdown that's been in effect since at least November 11th. And before that, they had a soft lockdown, right? And this is not helping. It's not doing anything. So are we just going to sit in our homes, having our economy and our culture destroyed? Is that the plan? Is that the acceptable plan from the mayors and the city councilors? Is that an acceptable plan for you or me? It's not. Certainly not. This is mismanaged, poorly managed, unbelievably badly managed. It's just like, how do you justify any of this with the data that they're showing? You can't. It's unbelievable. Here's another loss of our freedoms. Air Canada to start offering facial biometric recognition for flights. How do you opt out? Unbelievable, right? And in a time when masking people en masse is required, now they're having facial recognition. Like, from here up? Like, seriously? Okay. Oh, just take your mask off for the facial recognition to work, and then you can put your mask back on. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's going to work. Great. Super idea. Okay, here's scientist doing his own offline testing discovers COVID strains appear quite similar to the common flu. I was going to play this, but it's 2 minutes. I think it's worthwhile, but go watch it yourself. Here he's saying basically he went and tested because people were testing positive for COVID, they wouldn't have flu tests, right? Because they were testing positive for COVID, why bother getting a flu test? So due to this doctor, who has his face blurred out, started testing the same swabs for flu, and they came back positive for flu. So interesting, positive for COVID, positive for flu. And the reporter says, can you be positive for both? And he gives an explanation for why it's not a likely outcome. Worthwhile, but it seems interesting with the false positives. Again, back to, we're doing all these big lockdowns based on case data. And really, back to, even if you believe that the UK strain is more dangerous or more contagious, I think is what they're saying. Here's the Daily Mail saying only 377 people under 60 with no underlying health conditions have died of COVID in England's hospitals. That's from the NHS. So even if this new strain, which they're using because the current strain is not scary enough, people like me are saying, "Nuh-uh, this is nuts. You guys are being nuts." Here it is. Okay, hold on. Here it is. We'll go with this first, and then we'll get into the University of Florida. I'm going to play this. She's just been accosted by the pharmacist here, and the pharmacist is saying, "Hey, usually at a flu season, there's 2 or 3 people in flu. Now everybody in the hospital's got COVID." And she says, "Listen, I'm not saying COVID's not real, but I'll let her speak." But it's very interesting because I think that a lot of people are at this point. I think a lot of people are like, "This is crazy. This is just crazy. You're crazy. This is crazy. I'm not sick."
Time in the ICU. That literally the entire hospital is COVID cases. This has never happened.
I'm not saying COVID's not real. I'm just saying I'm not sick. Well, I'm not sick, and asymptomatic spread has been shown to be a myth. So why am I going to be treated like a sick person? Do you know that there have been fewer deaths overall in 2019 than there were in 2018? Look it up. Fewer deaths overall. All they've done is recategorize all the deaths. This is not what they're telling us it is. It's a lie. This is a lie, I'm telling you. It's a lie. And everyone's buying it. And it'll go on and on and on as long as they feed us
The emperor is naked. The emperor has no clothes. He's naked. I know you can't see this. She goes on to say, I know I'm not reaching anybody. I know you all think I'm crazy. She got the data wrong. The 2020 death numbers are lower than 2019 and 2018, I think is what she was trying to say. But when you're in this situation, you're kind of performing, because there's people over here. This is a woman who accosts her and says, like, you're making us sick. And she said, I'm not making anybody sick. I'm not sick. But there's a lot of people listening to her, and she's waiting. She wants to buy a corkscrew. And they're trying to get her to go away. I want to address something she says. She says, asymptomatic spread has been shown to be a myth. There's a Wuhan study, and I've cited it a bunch, that says taking the people who are asymptomatic, the healthy people who test positive, and testing their close contacts yields zero positive results of COVID-19. But let's not believe China. I advocate for taking our own healthy positive people, right? The people who test positive but are also healthy, and testing their close contact. And if none of their close contacts have any illness, then we should definitely open up, because there's evidence then that suggests that the Wuhan study was valid and that we can carry on and open things up. But here's a recent University of Florida research paper, and this person says, reported University of Florida researchers have found no asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic spread of COVID-19. The study was published online by the Journal of American Medical Association. This could change everything. I hate it when people don't link their source, right? I'm like, come on, like, I'm a guy in my garage, source it, for crying out loud. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I found it. So here's the study. Household transmission of SARS-CoV-2. They use PubMed, and they use they look at all of the research done up to October 20th, 2020, and they look at, from all of that, they extract the data. So is this something like the Wuhan study? No. It backs up the Wuhan study to a certain degree, but it's not as good as the Wuhan study. But it's still something. It's still something. This is a group of people. This was published on December 18th, I think. And it says, to study the transmissibility of asymptomatic SARS-CoV-2 index case files, E-figure 8 in the supplement summarizes 27 studies. So it looks at all 27 of these studies reporting household secondary attack rates from symptomatic index cases, and 4 studies from asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic index cases. Estimated mean household secondary attack for symptomatic index cases is 18%. While significantly higher than from asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic, 0.7%. although there were few studies in the latter group. These findings are consistent with the household studies reporting asymptomatic cases as having a limited role in household transmission. 0.07 is statistically not different than 0. So in all of and it's only 4 studies. So they're saying the symptomatic spread is a little high at 18% for SARS-CoV-2, but the asymptomatic spread is statistically 0, or less than 1%, 0.7% to be exact. So when she says asymptomatic spread has been proven to be a myth, I don't know that I don't know that that's entirely true. There's a lot of evidence that says asymptomatic spread is not something that we should be worried about that drives this pandemic. But we've got the ability to do this test. And if your job was to get us back to normal as soon as possible, wouldn't you be doing that test? Wouldn't you be doing that now? Wouldn't you be doing that as fast as possible? Why hasn't it been done? It seems easy. It seems very, very basic. It seems like if the health table isn't saying this, then they should be replaced by somebody saying this. Get this test done. Let's figure out if we can open up, if healthy people can spread this disease, because it doesn't look like they can. Yesterday I was talking about the all-cause mortality and the total deaths, and I was saying that in Canada, 14,000 people have been killed with COVID, not from COVID, okay? The test is such that, or the classification is such that if you test positive with COVID-19 within 28 days of passing away, and even they can test you after you die, post-mortem test, and then you can test positive and they say, oh, it was COVID-19 that killed you. So within that context, and I think that I made this point yesterday, but I felt like I didn't tie this up nicely enough. The disappearance of the flu, the fact that they don't test for the flu, the fact that the all-cause mortality is stable across time, so the 2020 numbers look remarkably similar to the 2019 and the 2018 numbers and the 2017 numbers. It's not a wild, we don't have 40,000 more deaths, we don't even have 15,000 more deaths. We've got, it's below 2019 and above 2018, or above 2018 and below 2019, I think, or something like that. So, and this doesn't break it down nicely like other charts that I have. I could show you the other chart. I'm not going to. I just wanted to point out that in Ontario, 4,000 people have been attributed as dying with COVID. And usually in Canada, we've got 6,000 people who die of influenza and pneumonia. And that's, I mean, it's not apples to apples, right? Like the 4,000 people in Ontario, that's high for a flu season, right? That would be a high flu season, I think. From what I can gather. But when you start understanding that so if you've got cancer and you die of cancer, but you have a positive COVID test in the past 28 days, well, it's now COVID death, right? So like there are people who would have died anyway that are being classified as COVID, hence the inflated numbers. But the real metric, the thing that indicates that there's a problem with this data, that we should be doing a lot more digging into what we know, is the fact that the all-cause mortality is relatively the same, and nobody seems to care about that. Here's an interesting thing from the NHS. So this is England again. I use them because they've got similar data sets to us. They've got a bigger population than us, but I mean like 28 million, 29 million more. We're about 38 million. They're at about 67, 70 million. So the populations can give information, right? It can give information because what they're doing doesn't exactly map onto our population, but it can. You can look at it for information to guide what you do. So, and look at it for information that would be indicative of a problem with the testing or a problem with the conclusions that are being drawn based on what we know about the data there, right? So here's Professor Norman Fenton. He says, on 19th March, 152,000 people reported COVID symptoms through the NHS triages. There were 1,379 confirmed cases, equals positive tests. 4 days later, on 18th of December, almost 8,000 people reported symptoms through the NHS triage, yet on 22nd December, there were 44,000 cases. And he's got the source there. Thank you. Love that. The remarkably diverging difference between cases and people reporting symptoms provides yet more evidence that the vast majority of those currently testing positive do not have the virus. Mass testing is exaggerating the problem. Yes, there are causal explanations for part of the divergence discussed in the article here, but not for the 625 times as many cases per people reporting symptoms since March. So he's saying that a great many more positive people don't actually have symptoms. And this goes back to my earlier point. If you have a way, an easy test with lots of people who are testing positive that seem to, you could fill your hoppers for testing days in and days out. We could do 3 weeks of testing. Let's do all the testing during the lockdown, finish it all off, and once this is all done, we can open up completely, because it seems to me that asymptomatic people have a high probability of not transmitting the disease. And if we can prove that, well, then we don't have to destroy our economy anymore. We don't have to destroy our culture anymore. We can go back to normal. Do they want to go back to normal? Do you think they want to go back to normal? Here's cryptographer being hired for the Bank of Canada. They want digital money. Why do they want digital money? Because if you get paid in digital money and you buy something, they can track what you buy, where you're spending your money. And maybe if you don't have enough social credit, they can stop you from buying certain things. And maybe if you buy too much of a certain thing, like too much candy or too much alcohol, then they can say, oh, you can still have access to your money. You're just not allowed to buy that. You've had too many violent video games today. That's going to reduce your social credit score, and you wouldn't want to have that happen to you, would you? I don't know, right? So you comply, right? People don't comply because they don't want to get kicked off Facebook. Have you seen? There's the guy who did the California. The California is a great place to live right now because it's so authoritarian. The redheaded guy, he's a lifter, but he was doing one about exactly that, like about how. This is the video I was talking about. So he's talking about how it's beginning to look a lot like communism, and talking about social credit scores and tracking the things that you buy and tracking the places that you go through the things that you buy, and all of that fun stuff, right? Tied into a nice little digital currency that is being developed by the Bank of Canada. Yay! I can't wait till cash and Canadian currency is outlawed, or just transition. Not even outlawed, they just transition it. It doesn't exist anymore. It's all just digital currency. Why do we need that paper stuff, right? It's going to be terrible because it's an infringement and violation of your privacy, right? Cash is important for private transactions and the ability to keep your bank account private for what you spend your money on. Like, oh, don't worry about it. We'll just track it on the other end. Each digital dollar is stamped by its own unique modifier or unique identifier, and we'll be able to track it from its inception to its destruction, right? In the Canadian computer system that are unhackable. Because don't worry, and money, it's just money. Don't worry about that. We'll just keep spending money. Beginning to look a lot like communism. Okay, and the last story of the day. I love in Brampton. 12 Brampton men charged after swords and bats used in an attack. So a 21-year-old and a 20-year-old who are not named survived. 2 men walking in the area just after midnight. Why were they walking in the area after midnight? Okay, whatever. This is on, which day is this? Christmas Eve. All right, Christmas Day, I guess. We're walking in the area after midnight, and they were confronted by a gang who used swords and bats to beat them. The pair, 21 and 20, survived the incident, but were taken to the hospital with injuries that were not life-threatening. Here's the list of names. Yowza. Okay. Okay. Right? The violence on Christmas with bats and swords. Is a poorly made sword better than no sword at all? Is a machete a better weapon? I don't know. Should we just start carrying those around again? Like, what happened? Here's a good question. And this is completely, I'm not going to get into the politics of this. The politics of this are obvious, right? But what happened to all the swords? Like, if there was a time where you had to be armed, and like Britain had all sorts of like important swords from, if anything about the Middle Ages that I read in grade 7 to 10 or whatever is to be believed, people had swords, and people, like family swords were passed down. Swords and blacksmithing were an important part of the whole world back then. What happened to all of that? Was it melted down in like World War I and World War II for cannonballs and things? I can't imagine that. Like, okay, yeah, for the war effort, son. What happened to all that stuff? And if we're getting back to swords and things like that, what does that say about our society? Have these lockdowns really resulted in us sliding back that far that I'm looking on eBay for swords? Can you do that? Can you buy swords in Canada at this point? Even like kitschy swords that you could maybe sharpen? I don't know. Is that the best is that the best weapon to arm yourself with? Gang of 12 men? Swords and bats? Like, where are you getting your swords and bats from? To be clear, I'm not looking for a sword or a bat, right? But there are people who are clearly getting swords and bats. And if confronted with a mob of 12 men with swords and bats, I think I'd rather have a sword than a knife, right? But what are you going to do? This is Canada, right? Only the police are allowed. It's illegal to have weapons, right? Isn't it? Because you might use them to shoot up Toronto. The only legal weapons are the ones you buy from the gun runners that bring them over the border from the United States illegally. That's the only way to get a legal gun these days. Legal, right? It's the only way to get a gun these days. And again, I don't know that other than to read it in the newspaper and understand that the other way is to sweet talk a farmer who's bought a legal weapon. Apparently, that's how 90% of the guns end up in crime scenes in Alberta, according to something I read yesterday. And I just think that that's like, it's funny because what they're trying to do is say, this is your fault, Alberta. You guys who are buying these legal guns are somehow letting them get into criminal hands, right? This is your fault. If you guys just did what we were supposed to do and wore your mask and didn't complain about it, we'd be out of this lockdown by now. We wouldn't need another one. It's your fault. All of the blaming from the politicians, it's wearing thin. It's wearing thin. I'm all done with it. I'm like, this woman is my spirit animal, right? And you know, people are going to stop paying attention at some point. People are going to realize that the attacks on our religion, the attacks on our culture is not an accident. The MPs carrying water for this, not an accident. Okay? Not an accident. Targeted, purposeful, silent until no one knows till everyone knows. Right? Remember the first lockdown? It was coming on the eve of St. Patrick's Day, destroying our culture, destroying our economy. For what? For what? Lies. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingWoicely.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful